some of the stuff that I did especially when I was young, was so, I look back, was so risky and at times kind of stupid, you know what I mean? But I got such good results out of it that it just fed the fire. And I would have prophetic experiences with the Lord that would then translate into real life scenarios, and nobody could take that from me. No one could, there's no theology that could break it, because I had the experience. And one specific thing I had happen that created kind of like a snowball effect was like right after I had first like started to walk with the Lord and give my heart to him. After that African guy had prayed for me in Merritt Island, and was gone. But I was laying up on my back in my bedroom, kind of drifting off to sleep, in between sleep and awake probably, right? And my ceiling kind of disappeared, and I could see the night sky. I could see the stars. And it looked like there was two lights up there, and as I looked, it was like there were like two like jets and maybe like F-18s or something just zipping across the sky. And as they kind of came across, then they started to curve and come down towards me. And I'm laying on my back in my bed seeing this happening. And they're like doing a straight up swan dive at me, just zooming towards me. And right before they crash into my room or into me, because my ceiling was gone in this experience, I could see them once they got close, and they were two angels, two of them. Man features on the face, the wings, the whole deal, right? And I'm new to this life, I don't know this stuff happens, but they're zipping right into my zone. And I like popped up out of my bed, real quick, and my ceiling reappeared, and nobody crashed into me, and nothing bad happened. It just startled me really bad. But it was experiences like these that I knew it wasn't my imagination. There was no drugs involved or alcohol or nothing. And it's not like I even wanted this type of stuff to happen. Like, it was kind of an inconvenience because it was changing everything. You know what I mean? And so I would start having this stuff, and I couldn't tell any of my friends because I didn't want to be looked at as crazy. People get on videos all the time. They like to talk about stuff like this probably, but like for me, it was like a really embarrassing and inconvenient. But I had one friend I could talk to about it. His name was Derek. And so, I started to have those type of experiences. And even after that experience, I would have dreams where these guys would be like almost like bodyguards. They would go with me everywhere I went, even in my dreams and stuff like that. And so I just knew like God's given me two of his angels, two of his guys. They kind of look after me. I didn't have much of a grid for it. Like I said, I didn't hardly ever read the Bible or anything like that at the time. I was new to the game, But I had a good friend I could confide in. And so I remember my parents, they went to a Baptist church, a pretty big one, for where we lived anyway, a small town in Florida called Park Avenue Baptist Church. You might have heard of it. But Park Avenue had some guest speaker come on like a Saturday night. The guy's name was Alan Smith. He was an itinerant minister. Anyways, a legitimate guy. And me and Derek, my friend that I used to confide in about all these experiences, go to the church with my parents that night. And afterwards, they're like, hey, why don't you go down to the front and let Alan pray for you? We're like, for real? Like, yeah. They're like, yeah, just see what he has to say. And we're like, okay, we'll try it, and in those days, we were kind of heathens, me and Derek. So like my parents, I think, were like, good, they're kind of coming around, they're getting into this stuff. Like, let's encourage it as best we can, right? So anyways, so me and Derek go down, and hey, I'm Alan Smith, a really nice guy, minister. And he's like, all right, well, I'm going to pray for you guys. And we're like, okay. He's like, well, let me hold your hands, which for me in those days is kind of strange. You know what I mean? I'm from Florida, like an 80s kid. So I was like, okay, so I put my hands out, he holds my hands, and he starts to pray. And so he says, I see two angels with you, which was like, whoa, and I had never told anybody that stuff except for Derek. And he's standing right there. So he's got the goosebumps on his arms. He'll remember this to this day. And we're like, dang, dude. He goes, but I see two more joining them. And the Lord has sent, now you have four angels with you to minister with you and do whatever you do. And I'm like, I don't do nothing. I'm just a 21-year-old dude from Florida. I didn't know nothing about this life, but it was such a profound thing to me because I'd never told anybody that. But it's one of those experiences where God's putting confidence in me that like, yo, you're special. Like, I have stuff for you. I have backing for you and stuff like this. Now I know this is for everybody, but then I didn't know. I'm just new to this game, man. The next night, me and my friend Derek, we find ourselves in Orlando. And there's this girl we both knew, and she was really dealing with some dark stuff. She was really dealing with some heaviness and some dark stuff, and really, really kind of oppressed by the enemy, you know what I mean? And so we're like, man, I don't want to be cheesy and weird about this, but like, I feel like we're supposed to pray for this girl, you know what I'm saying? But we weren't in some school that taught you how to do that. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't practical or normal like it kind of is now. And so again, it was kind of like an embarrassing thing to us, and especially to me. Long story short, we ended up praying for this girl, put my hands kind of on her shoulders or on her back, and just asked the Lord to help her out. I don't remember what I prayed for. And, really just for her to get freed up. There was a drastic response. The girl she kind of dropped to the floor. She kind of came into her right self, and she was relieved of a lot of that stuff that was going on in a pretty drastic way. And she was a really cool chick. Still is to this day. Great mom, intelligent and everything. But it's just like it was one of our friends we were trying to pray for, and boom, something really drastic happened. But anyways, she comes out of this state she was in. She was feeling really upset before we prayed for her, and she was like, I saw 4 people standing behind DT when he walked up to pray for me. And so me and Derek were like, whoa, dude, like that's that dude that the cowboy church guy just prayed for us the last night, you know what I mean? So we're walking through, and like this thing is becoming real. This life is becoming real. Like these experiences and stuff. This is real stuff. It's not just a dream. Like Christianity, the scope of this thing's bigger. There's a chapter in Hebrews, which is a super mystical book in the Bible, but it's chapter 12. And it really talks about not being like Esau, but being like Jacob, like the twins. One was really carnal and one valued the thing that which was eternal and spiritual. And it's just talking about realizing in Christianity, like we've actually come to Mount Zion. We've come to an innumerable number of angels. We've come to this thing that's real. And it's Hebrews 12 is kind of this like line drawn in the sand. Like you haven't come to a religious game and system. You've come to something incredibly supernatural, mystical, and more real than that which is even in the Old Testament. Like this is real stuff. And for me as a new believer, there was no question in it. You know what I'm saying? And, so we prayed for our friend. She got better. She got relief. We got encouraged. You know what I'm saying? Because all this weird angel talk, it was funny because Derek went to a garage sale and he found a book. It was probably the first Christian book me and him had kind of really got into, and it was called Angels by Billy Graham. I don't know if you ever heard that. But, so that was some of our early education, man. And, Billy Graham says when he's talked about angels, he said it's been the topic, that message, and from that book and the message that he preached off it was he got more feedback off of that than anything he's ever done. And that's like, Billy Graham's like the Michael Jordan of this thing, man. You know what I'm saying? So it's pretty wild to experience that and to hear that. But anyways, long story short, like I prayed for this girl. She got relief. Me and Derek did. The next day I rode off to Charlotte because I was fixing to move there. I was in Charlotte for a few weeks, maybe like a month or so before I was coming back to Florida. My parents had a condo for a vacation. So I'm in Charlotte. This kind of stuff's just happened. I'm feeling this sense of profound purpose and destiny and just like, real Christianity now that I know this. But I remember I was walking through my sister's house and I heard a name go through my mind, and it was Janine. And I was like, and she's a lady that used to babysit me and my sisters when we were kids. And so I just remembered her. I hadn't seen her for years or talked to her or whatever. And it was as if I was having a conversation with somebody that was invisible, that was inside of me. Hello, New Testament Christianity, right? And shortly after this name comes to my mind, I get a phone call from my mom. And she's like, Daniel, do you remember Janine? And I was like, whoa, that's weird. And she's like, yeah, like, well, Janine's really in tough shape. She's in the ICU in Orlando, and they're not sure that she's going to actually make it. And they've called her family, her parents, like everybody, like, yo, y'all need to come to town because, Janine might be on the way out. And she had been overseas and all over the world and had come back, and something had happened in her stomach. I don't know if it was a bacteria or whatever it was. I was young, but it was something to where she was like, her life was on the line, you know what I mean? And they had to emergency surgery, take all of her intestines and stuff out, put them back in. Like it was a real tough scenario for this lady named Janine that we knew. So my mom hangs up and I'm fixing to drive back down to Florida to the condo that they had. And in my mind, in my young Christian mind, I've had all these experiences. I've had this African dude pray for me at the movie theater. I've had these 2 angels crash through my ceiling in a prophetic experiences, and then they're around me in my dreams. And then I've got a Baptist minister that comes and prays for me and says, hey, you have two, now you've got two more, you know, and these are in front of my friend. So I have this level of confidence. I've prayed for one of my friends who was really dealing with some dark stuff, and she got relief of it. And so I'm starting to feel this sense of like, yo, God's put me here to handle this. And now I've heard Janine's name in my mind. So 2 + 2 = 4 in my mind, like, we're going to go fix this lady. And, you know, it's now as an adult, you think like, boy, you better know what you're doing if you're going to roll in somebody's hospital room and tell them what I ended up telling this lady. But in the time, I didn't. And I was so encouraged by God, and I felt so special, and I felt so empowered that I drove to Florida, you know. And I spent the night at my parents' condo in Ponce Inlet near Daytona. And then next morning, without telling anybody, I got in the car and I drove 45 minutes over to Orlando. And 21 years old, man, no ministerial training. Like, it wasn't like now. You go on YouTube and it's like, lay your hands on somebody and God wants to move through you. And like, you know, the debates of like, does God heal today or does he not? You know, like, I didn't even know this kind of stuff existed, man. I'm just having these experiences and I'm rolling hard with it, you know, because it made sense and it was working, you know. And so I literally go and park at Orlando hospital or whatever. And so I don't even know how I did. I just walked around and found my way to the ICU, and I walked straight up in it. And I remember thinking like, they're going to kick you out if they see you. So I'm just kind of walking in, and the ICU in Orlando, at least at the time, was this big round room. And I think some of the nurses were kind of looking at me because I walked in, and probably obviously that I didn't have a clue what I was doing. But what I did have a clue about is that I felt special and empowered by God, and that he had sent backup to watch me in my ways, and maybe I could use some of that weight to help out my friend because I heard her name in my mind. Sounds crazy, but until it works, then it's not crazy anymore. So I literally walked up in Janine's room in the hospital in the ICU, and she looked like death, which to a 21-year-old is kind of sketchy. But I walked in her room, and her mom was at her bedside, and I said, hey. And she's like, hey. I was like, oh, this is Daniel Turner, you remember me? You know, and she's like, I do. Hey, how's it going? And I said something along the lines of really ridiculous. It was like, I said, I heard your name in my mind the other day. And so I know it was God, and I just want to let you know that you're going to be okay. You're going to make it through this. You're going to be fine. And it was just like, basically, you're not going to die because God spoke your name in my sphere. And that means you're not going to die. And that's the authority I had it on, man. So, you know, if somebody told me they were fixing to go do that, I'm like, dude, you better have heard the Lord if you're going to roll up in the ICU and say that, or you're going to really cause some major disappointment. So I don't recommend doing that unless you've heard the Lord, then do it. But anyways, I actually had. So I said that to her, and it's funny because when I was leaving, she was like, okay, like, she was like, thank you. You know what I mean? When you're in that state, man, like, any encouragement probably is lit, you know? And so I was fixing to walk out the door, and I was like, all right. And I was like, you know, I go to church now and stuff. You know, that's the level I was at, dude. That's where I was, man. And she's like, that's good. And I was like, I live in North Carolina. I was like, all right, so, you know, I'll see you later, you know? And I just kind of walked out. And that was my intro to praying for a couple girls, you know, a couple people in my life. And, you know, Janine, you know, I think I got married like 4 or 5 years after that in North Carolina. She made it to the wedding, you know what I mean? Bought us a nice vase, you know what I'm saying? She's good, you know what I mean? She made it. So a couple of good stories, but I think the point that I'm really wanting to make here is like, there's something to the encouragement of God, that he encourages you and causes you to feel this sense of like purpose, destiny. And I think sometimes it can be a little annoying. You know what I mean? People as young believers, they think like they're the chosen one. And it's like, no, we need to teach them humility. We need to teach them how to, you know, couth. And it's like, nah, man, let them feel so loved and valued by God that they actually make moves and never get into the place where they become just religious like Esau in Hebrews 12. You know what I mean? Let them understand they've come to Mount Zion. Let them understand like the angels, the ministers of the heirs of salvation, are surrounding them at all times, and they have authority in this covenant to let there be light, just like their dad did. You know what I'm saying? Just like their daddy says. Like, they're the agents of this game. And a lot of times we think it's not, you know, I guess spiritually mature, but it's like, dude, like, humility comes from letting people step out in faith and do stuff, and sometimes falling on your face or making mistakes. But like, it doesn't come from like having rules like, inflicted on you to keep you down. You know what I'm saying? Like there's something to the empowerment of true prophetic ministry, like we said, that 1 Corinthians 14:3, where people feel so valued and loved by God that it causes them to have this sense of purpose and destiny and confidence that they know, like I am here to do good stuff. I mean, that's what the church is, man. Jesus, on this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell won't prevail. It's like, do you believe in spiritual warfare? Like, what kind of a question is that? Like that, on this rock I'll build my church, part one, the gates of hell won't prevail against it, part two. You know what I mean? Like this thing exists for light versus darkness. This thing exists for the mysticism and the reality of that realm to invade this realm. You know, there's something beautiful in Revelation 19 says the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And I love that verse right there, man, because prophecy's been made something spooky and not biblical. But what prophecy really is seeing people and situations through the testimony of who Jesus says they are, the value that God has on them, what Jesus paid for. And even like the reality of his new covenant, like seeing somebody as if they've never been affected by the fall. You know what I'm saying? In their fully healed and whole state, and speaking into that destiny and that purpose, and building that true confidence of who God actually says they are. And man, watch the results that comes from that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's so profound and so powerful. I think if I would tag an assignment on a message like this, which is kind of a funny, it's really just some stories of mine when I was young, but it's like you can't be too confident in God. You know what I'm saying? There can be religious hype and there can be stuff that's fake, but when the rubber meets the road, a true experience that's from the Lord will have something that manifests on the earth come along with it. Otherwise, we're just playing Star Wars Intercession.com or whatever. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? But like, there's something to really connecting to the heart of God and seeing this way. And it's like, you know, sometimes people find themselves in a spiritual rut, or they feel themselves like kind of dragging in this walk. And it's like, man, how about seeing somebody else through the testimony of Jesus, that Revelation 19:10. If you can actually recruit or like look for somebody to encourage the mess out of them, the heck out of them, whatever, you know what I mean? Like to build up, to encourage, not flatter, but you know what I'm saying? To get God's heart for and release that stuff and let your river flow a little bit, let your function happen. And then when that starts to happen, then start to see that stagnancy and that feeling of being stuck go from you, because you're actually functioning as you're supposed to in this life. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It's a lot of stuff, but it's another day in the life.